Hey Internet, Shaggy B here. Just wanted to let you all know this is a non-traditional Hwy47 commentary for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into in the episode, but just so that you are aware, this is broken into three parts, two of which are the actual episode. It's a two-parter, but this first part is really just a deep dive podcast into some of the history and current events going on with why we decided to do this today on just such short notice. It's currently about 3:30 in the morning on, well, the morning of June the 3rd, 2020, and I'm probably going to be up all night editing this. This is just something that I had to do, and that we as the people we are had to do to really help ourselves process this. Let us know what you think of the format, and please post any comments you have down below. Would be interested to have a discussion about these things. But anyway, here is part 1 of 3 of our commentary on past tense from Deep Space Nine. I'm not going to be doing theme songs or anything like that for this one. This needs to be a little more somber, a little more serious. So enjoy the episode. Hey Internet, Hwy47 here with you on the 6th of June 2020, and I'm saying that date first because that gives you relevance to what we're doing tonight. I am Shaggy B, with me is Draco Funk. Say hi, Draco Funk.
Hi, Draco Funk.
And with us is Scradrick. Scradrick, say something else.
Did you 6th of June 2020?
I hope I said the 2nd of June.
No, you did not.
Me.
We're from the future.
Oh, God. All right. The
Welcome
2nd of
to
June.
the world of tomorrow.
Oh,
Oh, so what's on
I thought
fire now?
maybe I was going to ask you in a second if you did that on purpose.
4 hours preparing for this episode, guys. It up in 10 words.
4 hours, not 4 days.
No, just 4 hours on the 2nd of June. You know, I looked at the corner of my screen and I saw
the number for the month.
Yes, and you know, nowadays, like it's kind of, people are sort of slowly transitioning to like the European way of doing like day, month, year, which makes a lot more sense if you think about it. And so that's what happened. But anyway, it is the 2nd of June, 2020, and we're in the middle of some pretty deep shit right now. And we are going to mark that by jumping out of our chronology in Star Trek. Tonight we are watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 3, Episodes 11 and 12, which are titled Past Tense, Part 1 and Part 2. And Draco Funk, let's get the usual out of the way. Can you tell us something about this episode?
Yes, Part 1 aired January 2nd, 1995. Part 2 aired January 9th, 1995. I watched these on those days. They both have an IMDb rating of 8.
Which I would be interested to check that number over the next few days and see if it creeps up. I mean, I know it's been years. Well,
but there are likely to be Star Trek fans that remember this and watch it as we are.
Well, yeah, and I've seen screenshots from it like being posted in social media the past few days and things like that. And it's if there was ever a time that Star Trek is relevant and Star Trek is something of a what am I supposed to think and what am I supposed to feel sort of source of that, I think this episode is it right now, as the United States of America and little bits of the rest of the world are being kind of pulled apart at the seams by uprisings among the public over recent events. Draco Funk, you said you saw these as they aired. I don't know exactly when I saw them for the first time, but it was pretty soon. At the time, I'm thinking this is January 2nd and 9th, you said these aired?
Yes.
Okay. And what I remember is that Voyager premiered sometime around January 10th of 1995. And I was super excited for the premiere of Voyager. And I had not... I would watch Deep Space Nine, but I was not like a fanatic about Deep Space Nine at the time, and I never really was when it aired. I was a Next Gen fanboy, and Next Gen ended, and then Voyager was announced, and I just kind of like waited for Voyager,
and you're like, oh, another show with a starship.
Exactly, yeah, and it's not all gritty grimdark, and which I was even thinking that back then.
Which comparatively Deep Space Nine nowadays.
Well, exactly, yeah, and I was just about to say, looking back, in comparison to what we have now, like this is not very much that. But I do recall, and then the other part of it too is that the first 2 seasons of Deep Space Nine were kind of weak,
Uh-huh.
and they weren't like bad. They weren't first season of Next Gen bad, right? But they were not like going from season 5 and 6 of Next Gen, which are what really got me hooked into Star Trek, to seasons 1 and 2 of Deep Space Nine. It was like, really, this is the best you got, and it was only into like it was into season 3 that I started to see like, okay, this has some potential and all that. But I do remember catching this a few times on TV and just being like hooked on this 2-parter. And I always remember, probably half a dozen times as a kid, that age, thereabouts. And I always remember coming away with exactly the same thought at the end of it. And and this hits home for me now, is that my thought was always, we can't let it get to this point. It was, I don't want to live in a world where things get this bad. That was always the thing that I thought. And here we are, the 2nd of June, 2020, and it's this bad.
I mean, we don't have the sanctuary cities yet, but
well, we very nearly did. That's one of the things that I want to talk about. We're gonna do something a little different with this episode, if you haven't realized that by now. I've spent hours putting together some information here, and we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on the background of this one. So would you guys, before we get into that, would you guys like to kind of share your feelings and thoughts from memories of seeing this episode? Hell no, you wouldn't.
I tried to hit the unmute volume button, and I accidentally muted all of you.
Okay.
Oh, and I go with
myself.
I go with Draco Funk first because that's usually the order of things. So
sorry, I'm like, okay, unmute myself to talk, and I muted all of you, which didn't unmute myself.
Well, we can edit that part out then.
Absolutely, we can. So, Draco Funk, would you like to share your memories of watching this episode back then?
I remember feeling like, wow, that's so much further in the future, and
yeah, right, and that's another thing that hit me too. Thinking about this is set in the year 2024, right? 4 years from today. 4 years and about 2 months, actually.
Good guess, Star Trek.
Yeah, right. And even up to before Trump was elected, to be specific about it, to me it was like, yeah, there's no way this is going to happen that soon. That hits me because here it is sooner.
Oh man, I didn't think we'd ever get here.
Yeah. Yeah, that says it all. That really does.
Yeah, I saw the episode as a precautionary, like, ooh, better make sure you don't do this stuff, otherwise this is where we'll be, and here we are.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about what it is that is happening. And I'm not going to give like a blow by blow. I don't think that's possible.
No.
Right now, so much is going on. The long and the short of it are the long and the short are, I guess. There was a catalytic event. There was a murder by a police officer in Minneapolis several days ago. An unarmed black man was strangled to death on the street by a police officer for effectively no reason. His He was accused of trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill at a retail establishment. And for that, he was executed by a police officer who responded to that complaint. And in response, protests flared up and have been met with, frankly, unbelievable levels of violence. And I hope that doesn't come across as a political statement that this is unbelievable. I know it will, because I know people have opinions. I have strong opinions about it, but you know, the U.S. Army has been deployed to Washington, D.C. to fight protesters. I have heard, you know, through the news and such that the soldiers that I knew of from Fort Bragg in North Carolina, which is another point that I want to get to in a minute, were not actually sent out to face the protesters, but they're there on some sort of logistical backup thing while they send the cops out. Yesterday, was it? A crowd was just suddenly charged and attacked. An Australian news reporter was punched in the face live on TV. And they were tear gassed and had rubber bullets shot at them in order to make way for the president to walk across the street to make a speech in front of a church.
And hold up a book he's never read.
You're right. Hold up a Bible. Yeah. And I mean, these are things that have actually happened for real in the United States of America. And that's just that. I don't know how to say that in a way that is less loaded. I don't know how to say that in a more neutral way. Like, that's a recounting of the events that have happened. And that's where we stand right now. We're in the middle of it. I personally, up until about a year ago, I lived in a city in North Carolina, in metro area North Carolina, that had a lot of racial tension and so forth, and it was a part of my everyday life to sort of deal with that. And with the work I do, I was very much involved in sort of navigating that world. Families attached to Fort Bragg were daily contacts in my job, and now, you know, members of those families are not even half a day's drive away from me in Washington, D.C., standing ready to attack citizens of the United States unprovoked. We're actually there. That's actually what's happening. I don't know any way to say that is less loaded, but the reality is pretty loaded. So that's where we are, and this episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine is very much about that. I do want to make the statement that Hwy47 believes, and I have not cleared this with you guys, but if you disagree with me, then that you agree with me. I know you do. Hwy47 believes that Black Lives Matter.
We do.
Yes.
Hwy47 believes that anybody out there is entitled to safety, treatment with respect, and the chance to get through your day-to-day life without being executed.
And it's sad we have to say that.
Yeah. That said, we are all well, and you know, and if we didn't believe it before, you know, we have pretty clear evidence right now. We are all pretty well privileged, you know, sort of middling aged white men. And so we will never know what it is like to live that life. You know, I live in a mostly black neighborhood now where I do live. And it has been both frightening to see the decrease in just sort of the neighborhood activity over the past few days. You know, that you know, kids not playing outside as much, you know, families not sitting out on their front porch and having phone conversations. nearly as much as they were, during the nice spring days we've had the past few weeks. But it's also very encouraging that every interaction I've had with people in my neighborhood, in my community, has been very positive over the past few days. I just by fact that I don't live in a large metro area or really that close to one anymore is a privilege. And we're all very aware of the privileges we have. But the point ultimately is that you deserve those privileges. Every one of us does. And I can sit here and I can convince myself and I can convince everybody around me that I have worked to earn what I have. And that's not wrong, but I started off with a pretty good hand, all things considered. And I think it's fair to say that you guys would agree with that we all have. So with that statement having been said, I want to share a website that I have discovered throughout my obsessive deep dive into social media that we've all been going on the past couple days. And I haven't linked you guys the site, but it's pretty easy to remember. It's ifyouarewhite.info. Yeah, go ahead and open it up if you want to. It's just this is something that that I just kind of discovered a little while ago, and it's just a little bit of it's sort of a help to what do you do? What do you think? I think as someone, and I've certainly had this experience, like I said, I lived in the Deep South in impoverished, racially charged communities, and I dealt with, these conflicts as a part of what I did for a living down there. And I learned that I don't understand how to deal with this. That as much as that I'm an eloquent guy and I can relate to people and all that, when it came to what is it like to be there, I don't know. I will never know. And it's helped me to read this and just sort of remember that I'm not the authority on this, to take some guidance. And this website, if you go to this website, I would encourage you all to do that. I'm not going to read it word for word for you, but I'll go through a little bit. Part of what it says is that these protests are about several people, including George Floyd, who was murdered by the Minneapolis police the other day. Christian Cooper is one who had a police hit called in against him in Central Park. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Ahmaud Arbery. This was the guy that was lynched in Georgia by a couple of Nazis down there after they thought he might have been trespassing. It turns out he was just jogging for exercise down the street, as I regularly do and have done for over a year now, with never anybody saying anything more to me than encouragement that I keep running and keep getting in shape. And I think that is a poignant thing to realize. Breonna Taylor, who was an EMT, actually, and she was a public servant who should have been, pretty well known by the community, and by other public servants, other police officers. Officers broke into her house thinking that they were, raiding somewhere else, found her in her bed, and shot her 8 times to death in her sleep. So those are some names to remember. And there you are. Again, I don't want to read the whole page. I do want to make the point, though, and this is something that I've really kind of internalized recently, because in my past I've been one of those people that I see these movements, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's feminism, whether it's whatever, and I say, don't you understand that I'm also hurting? And that's been my reaction. And I've learned more recently that it's not a question of whether it's not a statement that they're the only people who have suffered. It's a statement that we don't understand how much worse they have it, or for that matter, we just don't understand what life is like in their shoes. And I will never be in that position. But just there's a blurb on this website that says, if you are white and you say all lives matter, what many Black people hear is, I have entirely missed the point. And I want to admit that I, in the past, have missed the point. And I hope that I fail to do so in the future. So there we are. And that is kind of my diatribe on current events. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to add to sort of that, the real world discussion? No, go ahead.
Just that the website seems to be down.
Really? That's cool.
Oh, I'm looking at it right now.
I will link you in our Discord chat.
I have gotten to their Twitter page.
Ooh.
Excellent.
But it's still not coming up for me for some reason.
Okay. Well,
I was the last one to test the site, and I just overloaded it for you, Draco Funk. I was the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm sorry.
It's still not loading for me.
Okay. All right. Well, if it doesn't load for you, we hope it comes back. Reading all down this page, it echoes many of the things that I had learned working in a majority minority location and in a position where it was up to me to handle these sorts of things to a large degree. Just the whole page is full of things that I feel like I can say that I myself had to learn,
Mm-hmm.
So there we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk Star Trek. Let's escape from reality into...
Well, I want to segue into something else.
Go right ahead.
So, I have some valuable experience that you two don't have. And I'm going to go into it just briefly. But from 2003 to 2004, I was in a police academy.
That's true.
So, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, both were police officers. My great-grandfather lost his life in the line of duty, saving people in a flood. I always grew up with this idea that I wanted to be some sort of public servant. So, I went to the police academy, not directly out of high school, but shortly thereafter. Thinking I was going to be a public servant. And when I got there, met my classmates because it was a closed. There were about 20, 25 of us. And one thing I found overwhelmingly was the people that were there and the ones that stuck with the program were there for a power trip. Out of that entire class, there was one guy who was at the time, about 28. We kind of looked up to him because he was a Army veteran. He had done a couple tours. Nice guy. Like, he actually carried himself professionally. And he was the only one in that room that I believe deserved to be a police officer. Everybody else there was there for a power trip. I worked with a couple fast food managers. Like, they both worked at the same store. They both decided they were going to become police officers. And I was sitting with them. We were on lunch break one time, and they started bragging. Like, one of them started bragging, and the other one just kind of sat there and was, taking it all in, didn't say anything. And he was actually this guy's supervising manager. It was a manager and assistant manager. And the one guy started bragging about how he had coerced one of the female employees into sexual favors in exchange for getting out of, duties, the way she could go home early. And then he stuck her with those duties anyway, and he was laughing about it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the first thing that the first thing that comes to mind as the response to that sort of story is, well, yeah, he's just one guy. But if we've learned anything in the past 4 or 5 days, this is every police department in the country is full of people like this. Yeah. I spent, and I was floored just the other night, scrolling through, just my personal Twitter feed and just video clip after video clip after video clip of just everywhere, just, person walking away from a crowd, police officer sneaks up on them and bashes them over the head, things like that.
Sprays them from behind with pepper spray unannounced,
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So, So I want to stress that, this is an anecdotal situation, but it lines up with what we're seeing right now everywhere.
Yeah, no, and this is just my personal experience. It might not be like that for everything, but, this is just what I saw. So, this was a 2-year program too. I dropped out after the first year because I didn't take it anymore. I would see all this arrogance from my fellow cadets. They ended up bringing it, like, the retired cops that were our professors. A good number of them were good guys. Like, that's probably why they went on to be teachers, because they actually had the brains for it. But at one point, they brought in a Marine drill sergeant for our PT classes to scream at us and demean us, make people do push-ups till they threw up, treating it like boot camp. And it's like, we're not soldiers. We're supposed to be here to be public servants. And I would get in arguments with them about this. And, oh no, you got to go out there and take care of business. You can't give these guys any, slack. And I'm like, man, I grew up in a small town. I grew up in a town smaller than where Shaggy B and I went to high school, and I remember the local cops being a little more, you could walk up to them and talk to them, and they didn't, I don't think they ever really pulled their guns, at least the old ones didn't. But it was just totally at odds with what I had, the image of in my head. I've always been an idealist, but that just totally broke my expectations, so I ended up having to drop out.
And to be honest, I'm glad you did. I mean, I would have hated nothing more than to see you turn into that.
And I've seen, once again, these are testimonies from other people, but when you graduate from the police academy, you're kind of a provisional cop at that point. Your first job, you get assigned a senior officer that kind of supervises you, and they have to approve you to become a full-fledged cop. And if they don't like you, they can fail you, like, for any reason. So a lot of these old cops are like these disgruntled old curmudgeons that the only reason they're doing that job is because they have the most experience. And they're saying, all the shit you learned in the academy, forget that. All the de-escalation and modern police tactics. Like, This is the way I did it back in my day, and we had it hard, and you're going to have it hard too. And if you don't do what I say, you're not going to have a career.
Yeah.
So it's training cops the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, and that is one of the things. I was reading a transcript of the governor of Ohio made an address today about it. Mike DeWine, who I'm not his biggest fan. I'm more of a fan of his than I was, a year ago between coronavirus and some of the things he said today. And one of the things that he did bring up was, and this is something that I don't understand why doesn't already exist, but he brought up the idea of introducing a licensing certification continuing education system that's with oversight and with state requirements and things like that for police officers. Apparently there isn't one of those, and what the actual is wrong with our world that there isn't?
Well, I went on to be a public servant in another way, and I'm a medical professional now. Every 10 years, I have to get recertified. And every 2 years, I have to take continuing education courses. I think it's 24 credit hours worth of courses.
Right.
But why? Yeah, why does that not exist?
Right. Well, and with what Draco Funk and I do, we have similar careers in the same field, and also in public service, and my current certification is only good for 3 years, and I need 6 semester hours of credit to renew it, and I was on a 5-year one in North Carolina. My one in Ohio was 2 years, and then it was 4 because they kept changing the systems.
Ohio doesn't know what they're doing. It changes all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, and I mean, if I, can you imagine the Draco Funk if we had trouble dealing with somebody and our response was to kneel on their neck and choke them out until they died? Can you imagine what the world would do in response?
Well,
I mean, that was hard to
we wouldn't even be talking.
that was hard for me to even say out loud.
I can't.
So, yeah. I want to run through some quotes that I pulled from Memory Alpha out of this 2-part episode, just because I found them especially poignant for the moment. And some of them are a little more mild than others. The first one is welcome to the 21st century, Doctor. Nailed that one. In a related, 21st century history isn't one of my strong points. Too depressing. Let's go back. Let's repeat. This episode aired January 2nd, 1995. Right?
Mm-hmm.
No 9/11. No, not even the theft of the 2000 election. Okay, there's a political statement, but like that hadn't even happened, and so forth. It's not your fault. Things are the way they are, and the response: everybody tells themselves that, and nothing ever changes. That one hit me pretty hard. An argument between Cisco as Gabriel Bell, and if you haven't seen this episode, don't worry too much about the characters yet. You'll get that when you see it. But Gabriel Bell, Cisco says you don't know what any of this is about, do you? You work here, you see these people every day, how they live, and you just don't get it. And the police officer says, "What do you want me to say? That I feel for them? They got a bad break? What good would it do?" And he says, "It'd be a start." We don't get that now. I like this one. The military raids the compound. The officer is standing there, and they say, "Freeze!" And he replies, "I'm a hostage, you idiot." He would have been shot in real life today. And this one, let's talk hope here for a second. About Gabriel Bell. He'll become a national hero. Outrage over his death and the death of other residents will change public opinion about the sanctuaries. They'll be torn down, and the United States will finally begin correcting the social problems it has struggled with for over 100 years. And so I guess that's the question. Do you think that'll happen?
We're seeing unprecedented change right now.
Yeah.
Will it be for the better or for the worse is the question. Because all our Second Amendment proponents aren't standing up right now.
Right. Well, yeah, if there was ever a time, right? And I find my opinion on the Second Amendment to be difficult, to say the least. I'm conflicted about it. I always have been. But if you read it for what it is, and you read it in its context, and you understand history, and you understand the formation of the United States and the drafting of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the idea of the people keeping and bearing arms to protect society from a tyrannical government, if that's the justification, well, here it is,
Well, essentially, the Second Amendment, you use it to protect the First Amendment, and that is what's being trampled right now.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, there were parts of Los Angeles County, California today that had a 1:00 p.m. curfew. Imagine that. Like,
it's 10:38 p.m. on a live stream I'm seeing. It looks like fire and smoke in Washington, D.C. right now.
I'm sure. All right. So let's talk about some background of this episode. I did some investigation into the writing process and the thinking behind creating this. The writer of this episode was Ira Stephen Bear, who is a name that you recognize if you're a Star Trek fan from the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't off the top of my head, I don't necessarily keep track of writers in my head as far as who wrote what. So I don't have any other episodes in my head that are his that I really like. I'm sure there are others that he wrote that I really do like, but I don't know. Do you guys have any off the top of your head that you know of that are his?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
But isn't he also largely responsible for the new Battlestar Galactica? I mean, new and, as in not the old one.
Yeah, the newer one. I don't know.
Or wasn't he heavily involved in it, or is that Ron Moore that I'm thinking of?
I think you're Ron Moore.
Okay, cut out then.
Okay, no problem. All right. So he talks about a lot of things. His what gave him the idea to write it, and so forth. And I found a lot more here than I thought I was going to find. So I'm gonna read a quote from him, and this is talking about how he got the idea to write this particular episode the way he did. And he says, "I was down in Santa Monica one day, and there were all these homeless people there, and it was a beautiful day, the ocean, sky, sun, and homeless people everywhere, and all these tourists and people up and about, and they were walking past these homeless people as if they were a part of the scenery. It was like some artist had done some interesting rendition of juxtaposition between nature and urban decay right there in front of me. And the fact was that nobody seemed to care at all. And I said, there has to be something about that. Where does that go? How far do you take that?" And that evolved into the idea for concentration camps, essentially for the homeless. Now, I'm going to send you guys a link. And I'm going to do it on Telegram, because that's easiest. This is a link to an article that the Los Angeles Times printed during the writing process of this episode.
Oh, yeah, I read about this.
Yeah. This is an article in Los Angeles Times. Authors credited are Tina Daunt and Tina Nguyen, I think is how you pronounce that. Dated October 14th, 1994. And the headline is Homeless Camp Wade in LA Industrial Area. So they were considering doing exactly what this episode is about at the time they were writing this episode. And Ira Stephen Bear, he's, people have asked him if he knew about it. He says he didn't find out until later, but that, it hit him pretty hard. And just, skimming down through this, it's called for turning a vacant city block in the East Martin downtown into a homeless drop-in center where up to 800 people could take showers and sleep on a lawn. Sleep on a lawn. Instead of just letting them sleep out, on grass and pavement somewhere else, let's put them behind a fence and still make them sleep on a lawn. Just to be clear.
Oh, it's illegal and improper to camp in front of other people's property. Yeah, like the businesses that are people now.
That one hit me hard. Yeah. Because, and I love that in front of other people's property, right? Like Draco Funk, you have a house in the country, Yeah. Like you have a nice view. I'll bet every morning you walk outside, go on your front door, look at some back door.
Yeah, I don't want to walk out my front door without pants on, man.
The pants were implied.
In the morning, I don't have pants on. I'm just going to tell you
that. Pants,
Okay, fine. So in the afternoon, you walk out your front door because the article says in front of, damn it.
Okay.
And you look off like a mile across the cornfield in front of your place, down the highway nearby, and you see, like somebody left like a bag of trash outside their back door, like half a mile away. And the first thing you think is they're infringing on my property rights by doing that in front of my house, right?
From half a mile away, I saw a bag of trash. I would know that it's no, I wouldn't say. There's probably a bag of trash like half a mile away.
I'm sure, yeah. But it's in front of your property, man, so that's not okay.
Of course not.
Of course not.
I mean, by tomorrow, it's going to be on my property because that's what happens.
That's the wind blows that way. But, you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that is kind of annoying because I know the wind's going to blow it. I get all sorts of crap.
Yeah. Another one right here, and this just sums up everything so much. It's affecting business. That's the bottom line.
Can't have that business hurt.
Yep, more important than people's lives. Grandma's willing to die for the economy, and homeless people should be just shoveled into a cage.
Oh, but as long as it's voluntary, and the police will make it voluntary.
Absolutely. I mean, you can either do it or be arrested, right? That's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that just floored me that this was this was happening at the same time.
Well, back then, I didn't have the critical thinking skills to really comprehend what that was.
Well, of course, and I mean, and of course, we, nobody read the Los Angeles Times
in our town.
in the Midwest. I mean, the fact that this article is posted online from back then is amazing. I mean, I'm sure they didn't have a website in '94.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Some more quotes from Hwy47 Bear. When we did past tense, I expected all this media attention, and the little media attention we got was almost entirely negative. But the fan reaction was great. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen anything in commercial news other than, oh, these looters are just stealing everything? No, you haven't. People are still even writing that we only presented, quote, one side in past tense, and that we should have presented, quote, both sides and not just the, quote, liberal point of view. And I'm still trying to think what that means. In other words, we should have showed the positive aspects of putting the homeless into concentration camps. And I do admit we probably failed in that. We really did not show the many, many wonderful aspects of life without money and living in overcrowded camps. Shame on you, Hwy47 Bear. Be a better writer. And I like this quote. There's a character in this called BC who's like kind of a well, he's a drug addict and he's just kind of a crazy person.
Could have been played by Axl Rose.
He really could have, yeah. He murders somebody in part one for no reason, effectively. But then in part two, they purposely never mention him or treat him as a murderer. And the idea being, that society pushed him into this. The quote is, if you treat people like animals, they become animals, which is kind of the inverse of something I've been saying for years, which is if you treat people like humans, they tend to respond like humans. If BC had not been homeless, what would he have been? We created his backstory, stuff that would never appear on the screen, and decided he probably would have been a garage mechanic or something. Even though he's obviously a threatening, scary character and he's on the edge crazy all through both shows, we didn't define him as a murderer. And that raises a question to me, like, when you look at the events going on right now, and your reaction is, well, if they don't want to be attacked, then they shouldn't be causing all this property damage. You're completely ignoring the fact that you've pushed these people into a corner. I mean, if this were a middle-aged white family in Florida who had their house broken into and they shot the intruder on sight without trying to de-escalate, they would never face charges. Stand your ground, right? That's actually true where I live now in West Virginia also. I could shoot somebody in the face with a bazooka who was in my living room. I
mean, granted, that might be my first reaction.
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
Really shocked,
Right, and that's what I'm saying is that it's a reasonable response. Mm-hmm. The reasonable response to a threat on your life is to defend yourself, mm-hmm. and that doesn't have to mean something as clear cut as mano a mano. One of you has a weapon, the other does what he has to do to survive. That can be a cultural thing. That can be a race thing. That can be a neighborhood thing. That can be a social class thing. And that's where we are. And it angers me. It really angers me how much people want to focus on, well, they don't have the right to smash up that storefront, or they don't have the right to torch that police car. Well, it's not about rights at this point. It's about survival. Rights are a question we could have answered a long time ago and never gotten here, but we are way past that. And that's important to me. Okay. So there's some background on that episode. I wanted to mention just a couple of the, just a little bit about Avery Brooks, Commander Sisko. As you know, and all three of us, both of the three of us know quite a bit about him. He has a bit of a history as a trailblazer, as an African American actor. He was the first African American to receive a Master of Fine Arts in Acting and Directing from Rutgers. He was the artistic director of the National Black Arts Festival during this time. He was one of the starring actors in American History X, which would be a great film for us to watch in the near future.
Sure.
If we'd like to do that. He has done all sorts of narration on documentaries about slavery and about, Black specific issues and things like that. I want to make sure that's acknowledged, since we're doing a Deep Space Nine episode about race relations in the middle of, some of the biggest racial conflict that we've ever seen. I think it matters to do that. The character of Gabriel Bell, which Avery Brooks sort of plays part of. That character, interestingly, in the Star Trek canon, was born April 24th, 1987. He is younger than any of the three of us. He would be a millennial. He would be someone who could be one of our coworkers, or somebody we meet, somebody we could have known in school. So when you watch this episode, think of Gabriel Bell as somebody who could be your neighbor, who could be in your high school yearbook. Think of him as somebody you could have gone to a bar with in your college days. And fun fact, this actor has played two characters in Deep Space Nine, and both of them were stabbed to death in the middle of the episode.
Oh.
So, there you are. I also did a whole big
casting.
Yeah. Maybe he just dies well. I mean, it's like Sean Bean or like John Gielgud. Like, he dies on everything, right?
Like, don't get attached to this character.
Exactly. Boromir 17, I also did kind of a write-up on Brock Peters, who isn't in this episode, but he played Sisko's father. I don't think I'll get into that whole thing. We'll save that for Star Trek 6, but
yes.
But there we are. Anything else you guys would like to add before we possibly jump into the episode? Well, definitely jump into the episode, but I haven't decided whether I want to release this as one 3.5 hour long mega mix, or divide this up into parts. So we might cut it here before the episode commentary. Any thoughts?
How are we going to watch this?
We're going to watch this on Hulu. And what you need to do, open up Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 3, Episode 11, Past Tense Part 1. Press play, then hit pause, and hit your 10-second rewind button. That'll get you back to the beginning. Then we'll give you a 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Hit play when we say that, and you should be synced up with us.
There we are. And if you are watching this in some other means, it should line up. I don't know that they've done too many other versions of this. But I mean,
this on Netflix, do not hit the skip intro button.
That's right.
Yeah, especially since this is a new intro for you anyway, because you've never seen Deep Space Nine before, right?
Absolutely.
I've seen Deep Space Nine before.
I've seen it multiple times, but we're talking to the audience.
Well, and in fact, this is one of the 2 theme songs, right? Because they remixed it for season 4, I think.
Yeah.
Wasn't it when Worf came in, or was it?
Yeah. I think
season 4.
It was when Worf came in, and it was also when they start getting more traffic at the station. So the first theme is a little more, I don't know, solitary sounding. I don't know what the term for it is, but
ephemeral, maybe.
Did they add
Yeah,
a counter melody and like a what's that, timpani or something? They had timpani. I forget what it was.
I don't know, but it
I haven't
sounds more
compared
like
them
a space station alone, and then later on, it's like more of a, sounds like there's more bustle there.
Yeah. In either case, it's like a masterclass in French horn, so enjoy that.
Yeah. So shall we?
We shall. However, I, as predicted, need to take a Gelogia break. So if we are splitting this into multiple parts, then stay tuned. And at this point, go ahead and click on part 2 and load up your episode so that you can join us for Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And we will just jump right into it after this break.